to each other, you have to be able to explain. Explain them in light of each other, so to speak. Okay. I told you we're going to get to Pischei Nida. How does it get to Pischei Nida? Remember, I said if Yeshua supported Kinim, which is Psachia's thing, because of its symbolic meaning, so perhaps does opposition to Pischei Nida also have a corresponding symbolism in this whole structure of universalism as opposed to particularism? The answer is yes, it does, because here you have a medrash in Parashat Tazria on the pasuk V'isha ki yozav zoiv dama. The medrash says Mi kiya mitzvah ziva. Who was Mikaya mitzvah ziva? It's a very odd question, but the medrash's answer is Yechanya. Yechanya, because when Yechanya was in jail, let me get some more detail here. When Yechanya was in jail, and the jails of Nebuchadnezzar couldn't get out, says the Medrash, because the pasuk says Asir v'loy posach bais. There's no Pesach in those jails. But they got their protection, they got permission to get him a woman, but there's no Pesach, so they had to lower her in. Fine, they got a woman in. He has the opportunity to preserve the Davidic seed. Amazing. Woman comes down into jail. She says to him, problem. Wait. Kishashana aduma ra'isi. I saw a tiny speck of blood, red like a rose. What does he do now? This is the opportunity to preserve the Zerah of David. Pirish Mimena. Go back up to jail, pull the rope, tug her up, take her back up. She went and she's Toivel, counts Sivan Nikim. Hashem says, in Yerushalayim you didn't keep the mitzvah ziva, and now you did, so that's why I'm meichel you. Amazing medrash. And then what happened was, apparently, she got permission to come back in, or maybe he ended up getting out, according to, perhaps it means he was taken out. I don't know exactly how that worked. But the point is that everything, the ultimate preservation of Malchus Beis David was about Pischei Nida. It was about Zehirus in Ziva. Okay. So now we're getting somewhere. That suggests then that Rabbi Yeshua's opposition to Pischei Nida, and of course we have to explain what does this really have to do with the woman? What does this really mean? But at least we're getting somewhere. Rabbi Yeshua's opposition to Pischei Nida is like his support of Kinim. Like the Bnei Reb Chia, who secretly, as it were, at least, support a universalistic version of Das Hashem. To replace the particularistic system of Das Hashem Abayis Rishon, so too Rabbi Yeshua, and therefore they said, you know what, maybe let the Malchus Beis David disappear. That's what we need for Mashiach to come, so we can start the new, out with the old, in with the new. And Rabbi Yeshua is doing the same thing. Rabbi Yeshua says, Pischei Nida, I don't like that. Pischei Nida. I don't like that. You know what I like? I like Kinim. I like Psachia. Amazing. I want to go through now, since it's just so interesting in terms of the, like I said, the structures that Chazal do, that Chazal make. I want to go through some other allusions in Chazal that allude to this this whole parsha. One is in the Gemara in Haris. Remember, I started off. I told you that Rabbi Elazar Chasma in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, he is the one who he appreciates Pischei Nida, right? He said Kinim and Pischei Nida are gufei halachas. They're great. They're the meat and potatoes of halacha. He likes Kinim and Pischei Nida, and in that Mishnah he compares all the mathematical kinds of sugyas. And I mentioned that's appropriate because Rabbi Elazar Chasma, the Gemara in Haris tells us, knew how to calculate how many drops of water there are in the sea. So he was a great mathematician. Okay. Now listen to this Gemara in Haris Daf Yod, and you'll see there's other allusions to these ideas that we've been discussing. And this Gemara is going to also help us understand that Rabbi Yeshua's opposition to Rabbi Gamliel, or his conflict, his tension with Rabbi Gamliel the Nasi, also has to be understood in this light of Rabbi Yeshua being supportive of the new universalistic Judaism, as opposed to the old Davidic, so to speak, and particularistic Judaism. So the Gemara in Harris goes like this. The pasuk says, Asher nasi yechta. When a nasi sins, he has to bring a certain kind of carbon. And the Gemara talks about, that means not if a nasi was a Mitzorah, because if a person is Mitzorah, the pasuk says about the king, Uziyahu, that he was a Mitzorah and he was in the Beis HaChavshis. Why was he in the Beis HaChavshis? In the house of freedom. That means he was freed from his royal position. Does that mean that being a king is being a slave? When a person is takes a break from being a king, he's called free, implying that being a king is slavery. Says the Gemara, yes, because one time Gamaliel and Bishua were going on a sfina. Gamaliel had bread, and Bishua also had flour. Gamaliel's bread was all used up. They ended up having to use Bishua's flour. So Gamaliel said to Bishua, how do you know we're going to be out in the sea for so long? They even brought flour. So Bishua told him, because there's a star that comes up once every 70 years. It's a code word there. And this star causes the sailors to lose their way. And I figured, what if the star comes up? Okay, so I brought flour just in case. So Gamaliel says to me, you're so wise, and you're going on a boat. Apparently he was on his boat for business. Gamaliel says, you're such a chacham, you should be able to have some parnasa without traveling in a boat. And Rabbi Shua said back to him, why are you worried about me? You should worry about your two Talmidim that are on dry land. Belazar Chasma and Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah, who both of them know how to be able to calculate how much drops of water are in the sea, and yet they have no bread to eat, and they have no clothing to wear. So Gamaliel goes back, he says, you know what, you guys, I heard how impoverished you are, I want to give you a position of Sorora, Rosh Hashiva. And he said for them, they said, no, we don't want to be Rosh Hashiva. And he said to them, what do you think? You think I'm giving you Sorora? I'm giving you Avdos. King has to be an Eved. That's the end of the Gemara. So I want to explain to you how so many allusions in this Gemara are about this idea. First, let me tell you a little bit about Belazar Chasma and Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah. Belazar Chasma was the one who appreciates Kinim and Pischei Nida. And what I'm going to show you is that he is like the he and Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah, Talmidim of Gamaliel, are like the anti-Psachia. Because you remember Psachia, why is he called Psachia? Pesach, he could open his mouth. Belazar Chasma means muzzled. And the reason why he's called Belazar Chasma, the Medrash says, in Vayikra Rabbah of Gimel, is that he once went to a town and they asked him down for the Yom, and he didn't know. He wasn't able to. He didn't know the tefillas by heart. And then he went to Bekiva and he taught him how to do it. Next time he came and they said, it's Chasma Belazar. It must be that he really knows that. He's just keeping his mouth shut. So his name means muzzle. It's the opposite of Psachia, and it comes from the fact that he didn't open his mouth in prayer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah is also an anti-Psachia person. I'll show you how. Because in the Tosefta Shkalim, there's another job in the Mikdash. And that's, remember Psachia Lakim, he was in charge of the birds. Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah had a job in the Mikdash, which was, he was in charge of Ne'ilas Sha'arim, closing the gates of the Mikdash, right? Mordechai is Yoshe B'Shar Melech, he is Psachia. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah is the one who locks the gates. The Gemara tells us in Erech, told Rabbi Shua, who was one time coming to help him close the gate in the Mikdash, said, no, you're a singer. Don't come help me close a gate. Rabbi Shua closing a gate, worlds cannot crash like that. Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah closes the gates. Rabbi Shua is an opening the gate kind of person. The sons of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgudah, the Tosefta says in Trumas, were Chershim, his grandchildren, some say his nephew, that's Gemara Chagiga Daf Gimel, and he in the Mishnah Edius said a halacha about a cherish. Okay, which means there's this midah of the speakers, Pesach Peh, and there are those who say, like Talmidei Gamaliel say, if we don't have Lashon HaKodesh, we are struck dumb. We can't speak, we can't pray. Okay, and these are the two Talmidim of Gamaliel that Rabbi Shua alludes to in the context of, what does he say? He says there's a star that comes up once every 70 years and the sailors lose their way. That's like the once every 70 years, after 70 years of Golus Bavel, there's a star that arises, the possibility of Geula. And the sailors, the Sanhedrin, get led astray. And they think we have to go back, that Geula is going to mean to go back to get us someone from David, but really Geula means not to have a king. Says in Gamliel, what do you think? You think I want to be king? You think I'm in this for myself? I'm an Eved. That's the message here. It's a tension between Rabbi Shmuel and Gamliel. The story about Rabbi Shmuel and Gamliel on the boat and his reference to his Talmidim and the fact that he knows that the sailors get lost every 70 years is actually about, should we have kings, should we not have kings? And Gamliel says, don't suspect me of being selfish. I don't consider a king. I'm not a king. I'm not in it for myself. I believe this is right, but it has nothing to do with the fact that I am lording it over someone. And here's something interesting. And this is something which I have to say is not, okay, it's a little bit speculative, but it seems pretty compelling. As I told you, the story of the Megillah is right there in the middle of the Persian Empire's original permission to give the Beis HaMikdash, which happened by Koresh before the Megillah story. It was taken back by in the days of Artaxerxes, which Chazal says Achashverosh took back the permission to build the Beis HaMikdash, because there was a sitna, there was this opposition. It's described in the Sefer Ezra, written by Shamshai Safra, which Chazal says is the son of Haman. So there's a major connection between the Beis HaMikdash and the Megillah. And then Daryavish, son of Esther, allows them to continue to resume. In between this whole story, what happened in Megillah's Esther, which it's very significant because the point is, like I was saying, the point is that the whole story of the Megillah created this tie-up between the global empire, Paras, and the Jews, and it made that the Persians supported the Jews. Now, why did the Persians not allow them to build the Beis HaMikdash? Why did, in other words, Koresh originally gave his permission, then he rescinded it. Why? Why did they rescind the permission? It says the Pasuk in Ezra, the sitna, this opposition that was written, was in the days of Artaxerxes. They said, if you let them rebuild the city, they will not give taxes, which means they'll try to achieve political independence. And that's what it says explicitly. They're a rebellious city, and they're not going to give you any taxes, which means if you give them religious independence, they're going to look for political independence. Okay, the Megillah happens, and by the way, the Rabag says Mordechai, it says in the beginning of Ezra, Sefer Ezra, Mordechai went up to Yerushalayim back in the days of Koresh with Zerubbabel. What's he doing in Shushan in the Megillah story? Says Rabag and others, he went back to Shushan when the Beis HaMikdash was stopped to try to do shtadlonis and get them to give permission to rebuild. And what was his shtadlonis? This is the Megillah story. That's his shtadlonis. And that's where the Megillah story, Yishlemer, ends. The Megillah story ends by Yosef HaMelech Achashverosh Mas. Because the question that the Persians were interested in is power, political, economical power, and that's why they wouldn't give the Jews the religious independence, because if they give them that, the Jews might take political independence too and not give the taxes. The Megillah story ensured the Persians that they're safe with the Jews. You're going to get your taxes. Okay. The exact same story happened in the days of Rabbi Shua. This is a medrash, not such a known medrash in Parshas Toldus. In the days of Rabbi Shua, the kingdom allowed them, gave them permission to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And they started building. But the Kusim told the king, the Romans, and the Medrash just quotes this pasuk in Ezra, just lifts it. You should know that if you build this city, it's going to be rebellious and not going to give taxes. So they said, forget it. They stopped their building. And people were crying, and Rabbi Shua had to go tell the people, take it easy, be happy that the Romans are leaving us in peace, and nothing we could do about it, because it was going to be a major revolt against the Romans. So what happened was that there was an opportunity to build a Beis HaMikdash, actually. But the Romans were afraid that along with religious independence to serve Hashem, the Jews will want political independence. And Rabbi Shua was involved in that. Okay. So think about it then. In the Megillah story, what affected that the Persians were no longer worried about the Jews seeking political independence? The fact that the Jews were universalists, led by Mordechai, who was involved in Esther marrying Achashverosh. That's what Yeshua stands for. Like the Bnei Reb Chia, who are opposed to Rebbe. And then there's Gamliel, who was also a Nasi, also from the base David. So Yeshua's opposition to Gamliel, it would seem, works along the following lines. It's not just we have to be doing a new Mahalach in Judaism. It's that if we wouldn't try to retain our connection to the political independence, the House of David, represented by the Reish Goyla and the Nasi, we would actually have the Beis HaMikdash. Because that's what happened in the Bnei Bayesheni. The Goyim had to, the powers to be had to be convinced, had to know that the Jews are perfectly happy without political independence. And that's why the story goes that we did everything with a Mordechai figure, and we did everything within the Persian kingdom instead of trying to retain some Davidic leader. To the extent that we did, it caused problems, like it actually did in the days of Yeshua. So the point is then that the tension, let's call it, the famous tension between Yeshua and Gamliel is rooted in these kinds of calculations. What's best for the religion? And not just what are we supposed to be doing today in terms of what Hashem, where the world is going towards, but actually real ramifications for having or not having the Beis HaMikdash. I'm going to show you also now in some of the other in some of the debates between Gamliel and Yeshua that led to the fight between them, how there are these allusions to these ideas. So the famous one in Masechtas Brachos where Yeshua says Tfilas Arvis Rishus and Gamliel says Tfilas Arvis Chayva. Yeah, because the root question is about tefillah. Right? Because tefillas rishus means if you feel like it, if you can come up with it, if you have the words, say it. If you don't, don't. That's the old model. That's the Mordechai model of tefillah. And Yeshua holds that tefillas arvis, which is the night tefillah, which corresponds to Galus, at least that tefillah still retains the old kind of tefillah, which is that it depends on the person. And Gamliel will have none of that. That doesn't exist anymore. Now everything is chayva. Tefillah equals chayva. There's no such thing as tefillah rishus anymore. And as you all know, Gamliel gets deposed and he gets replaced by a zaken who's keben shivim shana. And that day they removed the shomer haPesach. They removed the shomer haPesach, and they said anyone could come in because Yeshua is about Pesachia. The doors are wide open, and Gamliel is the one who sets up the boundaries. And the Gemara in Brachos continues and says, on that very day, the Ger Mitzri came and said, was it the Ger Amayni? Sorry, Yehuda Ger Amayni came and said, "Can I marry a Jewess?" And Gamliel said, "Of course you can't. You're an Amayni." And Yeshua said, "Yes, you can." And Gamliel said, "What do you mean? But an Amayni can't marry?" And Yeshua said to him, "But the pasuk says, Sancheiriv mixed up the nations. If Asir Gvulos Amim, Asu the same Shesesi." To which Gamliel said, "What do you mean?" But the pasuk says they came back, and Yeshua says, "No, nobody came back yet. Shavti Yeshua Am Yisrael v'adayin lo shavu. We're not back yet. We're not back yet. The boundaries are down." If you remember that pasuk of Sancheiriv that says that he mixed up all the nations like a cane, like a nest. So the machlekes of Gamliel and Yeshua, meaning what their real issue is about this question of how to understand the world where there are no borders, as it were. Yeshua says we're in a borderless world. We're in a universalist world where nationalism has no mitzias, has no place anymore. That's what the machlekes is really about. And Gamliel, who's the royal seed, the king of Bnei Yisrael, he's the one who is still continuing the old model of Judaism when we are distinct and independent. The other machlekes is also about the famous machlekes in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, where Gamliel said one calculation for Kiddush HaChodesh, and Yeshua said a different one, and Gamliel decreed that he has to come to him and he has to be nichna to him. So the Gemara goes like this. There it's also pretty explicit. The connection, there it's very explicit, the connection to Malchus Beis David, because Gamliel said, "I have a Kabbalah from Malchus Beis David, that the moon sometimes takes a small path, sometimes takes a long path." And then the Gemara continues. It says, Rabbi Chia saw the moon, and it was the fact that the moon was visible was going to get into the way of how they wanted to make Rosh Chodesh. And Rabbi told him, "Go to Ein Tav," and send me a siman David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. So clearly the moon, clearly the Machlokes and Gamliel Mishur over there has something to do with Malchus Beis David. What does the moon have to do with Malchus Beis David? So the Mashah says, because the moon after 15 days gets smaller, and Malchus Beis David got smaller 15 days, still Tzidkiyahu, okay? And just like, says the Mashah, just like the moon disappears and then renews, so too Malchus Beis David will only come back after it completely goes away. The fact that the moon has been covered is a siman ra for Rebbe. So that's why the Gemara says that Reb Chia took a clump of dirt and threw it at the moon and said, "Go away." Reb Chia could do it like his sons, but not Rebbe. Rebbe doesn't like that. Rebbe tells him, "Gola ein ta v'kache," and the siman is David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. Look at the Mashah over there in Rosh Hashanah Daf Chafei. It's beautiful. But there's something more over here. What did Gamliel tell Reb Shua when he was opposed to his calculation? He said, "I have a Kabbalah from Beis David. Sometimes it takes long, sometimes it takes short," which means you guys think that Malchus Beis David is down for the count. You guys think it's time for a brave new world where we're universalistic. That's not. It doesn't always follow the chronology or the sequence of events. Doesn't always follow in the way you expect it to do. Right? Because the Bnei Reb Chia said that the Sanhedrin perhaps made an error. Perhaps the Sanhedrin should not have preserved Malchus Beis David. Perhaps it's time for Malchus Beis David to go away. Says in Gamliel, the moon doesn't always follow a regular path that you could predict. And the last thing is that what happens in that Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, where Bishua was opposed to Gamliel's Cheshbon, and Bishua was comforted and said, if we're going to start questioning the Bezdin of Gamliel, we'll have to question every Bezdin from Moshe till now. Because it says, Vayal Moshe Aaron Nadav Avihu V'shivim Miziknei Yisrael, without a name to tell you, as long as they're the Sanhedrin, they're good. It doesn't matter who they are. So what the point of that Mishnah is, it's telling us, don't start questioning the Shivim. Don't think that the Sanhedrin didn't know what they were doing, as the Bnei Reb Chia did. Right? The Bnei Reb Chia held that the secret of the Shivim is that the Sanhedrin actually should have said, okay, Malchus Beis David will go away. Says in Gamliel, we don't question the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin knows what they're doing, and Malchus Beis David will take its own time, its own pace, and no one's going to call it over for its time. One more remez also to this really interesting thing. On the pasuk of Vayavay Amalek, the Mechilta says, Vayavay Amalek, says Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar Chasma. Why does Amalek come? Because Klal Yisrael is Pirush Minat Torah. Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar Chasma. So I would suggest that, it's not a common occurrence that the Medrash should say that two Tanoim, both Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar Chasma, said the same thing. I would suggest that the reason why the Medrash is saying this is because we know Kol Yaakov Vayidai B'dei Esav. So if Amalek came, that's because there wasn't Torah. We had this big machlekes. So Yeshua has the Torah that he appreciates, Kinim and not Pischei Nida, and the Elazar Chasma says, I like Kinim and Pischei Nida. Says the Medrash, both of Yeshua and Elazar Chasma, despite the fact that one is Elazar Chasma's Talmud Gamliel, and he has his Torah that he's into, and the Yeshua has his Torah that he's into, but they both agree that Kol Yaakov Vayidai B'dei Esav, and that if it would only be Isaac and Torah, whichever Torah it may be, will be secure against the Yadayim B'dei Esav.